Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is September 18th for Guilds of Ravnica preview season. As with all of the preview season days so far, I'm catching up from the cards that were spoiled in the afternoon, throughout the night, and into the wee early morning of today, and, into the midday of today as well. Also had a preview card, an exclusive preview card we went over. It's on the channel as well as an exclusive video too. And Pure MTGO, we also partnered with them with that, and they have an article on their site as well if you want to check that out. I mean, kind of a mock-up deck on that video, and also the author of the article on Pure MTGO made a couple of mock-ups of that deck as well. Can be used for mill, can be used for undergrowth, and even jumpstart. And just a bunch of fun stuff. We'll talk about that last as far as the card in this video. But for now, let's get into Hazda Marshal, a 1-mana 1/1 human soldier. Whenever the Marshal and at least 2 other creatures attack, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. This card is super good in draft limited and probably will see standard play in a white weenie deck. I definitely want to put this into a white weenie deck as well. If you guys saw previously, I made a white weenie deck. It's on the channel. I'm sure I'm going to put it like right up here somewhere. But that deck is super impactful, can win on turn 4, turn 5 very quickly, very aggressively, and this card just gives it nothing but gas as well. White has got so many low to the ground strategies now, it's kind of insane. This is kind of a battalion ability, like a mechanic from previous not Guilds of Ravnica, but previous Ravnica sets. Marshall really liked this card a lot in draft sealed, and of course standard just said that. Moving up, we've got Gird for Battle. This is a weird name. I don't really haven't heard Gird in a while, at least. A 1 white mana sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to each of 2 target creatures. Really like this as well in draft and sealed. Great trick for us to be attacking in. It is sorcery speed, so we can't do it as a defensive kind of combat trick, but we can do it on our side of the field to pump up our creatures before we attack in. I like that a lot. I'm not going to see any kind of standard play though because of the sorcery speed clause on top of this. Moving up, we've got a card that needs to be translated, and this is going to be, let's see, Malicious Smothering is the card here. 4 mana instant. Counter target spell, exile it. You may shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard to your library. This is very interesting. I'm not sure this will see standard play, but it's kind of like one of those cards where it might, because it can shuffle things from your graveyard back into your library by just countering a card for 4 mana. It's not necessarily Bone to Ash or anything like that where it can do some extra stuff, but it's very similar in that you kind of think it might see play in a standard deck, but I feel like probably just going to see draft and seal play instead. Really not seeing it anywhere else. Art on this card, also super good. Can't wait for a high-res version of this piece. Another card is Etrala the Silencer. This card is legit amazing. A 4-mana 3/5 Vampire Assassin legendary creature. It can't be blocked, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile target creature that player controls and put a hit counter on that card, which is amazing. That player loses the game if they own 3 or more exiled cards with hit counters on them. Then after that, Etrala's owner shuffles Etrala into their library. So this is a card that's kind of going to be making waves in Brawl and Commander, but might see play in like a weird like standard deck somewhere. It just seems like if you hit your opponent 3 times and if they have 3 creatures, then you just win the game. And that's kind of scary, but this is kind of built more for Commander and Brawl for sure, like multiplayer Commander, absolutely. This is a really fun card. If you get this as a card in Draft and Sealed, this is a bomb. And if they don't have a removal spell for this, if they hit in for 3 times, you just win the game. This is insane. I love this card. So far, a lot of the Dimir stuff in Guilds of Ravnica is looking pretty nice. Let's move on to another card here. We've got another card that needs to be translated. This is Crawl Scavenger, a 5-mana creature, insect, scout, 4/4 with undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard. This is great for draft and sealed, being able to kind of bounce back from a hard hit from your opponent. It's also just a 5-mana 4/4 body, which is pretty good. A nice, decent sized bomb for you. Not necessarily a huge bomb like our 6/5s and all that kind of stuff from the previous spoilers or previews. But still a decent card because it gains you lots of life for only 5 mana. Like this quite a bit in that format, but not going to see any kind of standard or modern or anything like that kind of play. Moving up for us, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is a card that has some awesome art on it. I love this art. Undercity Uprising is a 4-mana sorcery. Creatures you control gain Death Touch on end of turn. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. This is basically giving your entire board, of course, Death Touch, and killing something on your opponent's side of the field. Even if your creature does lose the fight, it still has Death Touch, so it's basically a removal spell for you. And this is also a common, so you're going to see this quite a bit in Draft and Sealed. Very powerful Golgari removal spell. Absolutely going to pitch into Golgari if you see this in your opening pack, maybe. If you have kind of a terrible rare, this might be a card you want to get next after that. Make sure you go by the Bread Principle, which is bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, and dirt. This is Supreme Removal, as well as just giving your entire board state Death Touch as well, which, I mean, this is probably a card that's going to end the game too, along with being a removal spell. Amazing. Next up for us, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is the Crawl Harpooner. This is a 2-mana creature insect warrior with reach. It's also 3/2 with undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, choose target creature you don't control with flying, and the Harpooner gets +X/+0 on to end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Then you may have the Harpooner fight that creature. This is amazing. It's basically a 3/2 for 2, but it's also a creature that has reach, which is very good. That's already pretty decent, but it's also a creature that, like, you know, can fight a flyer on your opponent's side of the field by pumping itself and then fighting it. Amazing card for Draft and Sealed. Might even see some sideboard play in Standard because of how good this card is, especially in the mid game against like a mono red aggro list where they have lots of Rekindling Phoenixes and stuff like that. Really enjoy this card a lot. I wish it was like +X/+X. Obviously that's too good. +X/+0 though. Fantastic removal spell and just an overall fantastic attacker if you don't have anything on their side of the field to remove too. Moving on here, we've got another card that needs to be translated. Lots of translated cards today. Corpse Troll, a 3-mana creature troll with trample. It's a 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the creature card from your graveyard. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Corpse Troll. If you can't, sacrifice Corpse Troll. You can pay 2 mana, discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Corpse Troll. Very interesting. This is a kind of a card that definitely needs to be feeding itself the entire match. It's a card that's going to kill itself eventually in Draft and Sealed. It may not do that in Standard unless you just completely run out of gas from your hand, but I do think this card in Draft and Sealed is a legitimate bomb if it can last 2 or 3 turns, because it's going to be a 5/5, a 6, 6 to 7, 7, just slamming in turn over turn. It also has trample on top of it too, which makes this incredibly impactful. One of the few cards where you can just continually get in, and it's going to do more and more damage as the match goes on, so if they don't have a removal spell for this card, they're probably going to lose unless you run out of creatures to sack to this card. So love this card a lot. Can't wait to play this in Draft and Sealed. I don't think it's going to see much Standard play just based on how kind of narrow the pathway is for this card, but in Standard you can definitely give it some more gas to go with for sure. So this might be a card that could see some Standard play in a weird undergrowth deck like Golgari Clan, of course. Moving up, we've got Citywide Bust, a 3-mana sorcery. Destroy all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. This card is crazy powerful. I'm not really sure where it's going to fit other than just wiping the board of a mono-green Stompy decks for sure. So if your opponent plays a Galta, you just play Citywide Bust the next turn, and that's going to do it. Love this card as a great board wipe for that matchup, that particular matchup. Not very good against anything else, of course. It still doesn't hit Steel Leaf Champion because I believe Steel Leaf Champion is... Wait, is it 4 toughness? I gotta look up now. It's definitely 4 toughness. Wow, this hits Steel Leaf Champion as well. So this is a card that's definitely mono-green aggro hate. Love this card a ton. In Draft and Seal, this might not be as impactful, but in Standard, this card will probably be a sideboard forever and ever in mono-white decks, especially mono-white weenie decks for sure. Just getting away the big creatures on their side of the field. Wish you would exile them. That'd be awesome, but it is 3 mana, so it's, you know, that's asking for too much. I do think this card is very good, though, for what it's doing. Next up for us, we've got Risk Factor, a 3-mana instant rare. Target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards. You also have Jumpstart, so this is a very interesting card for 3 mana at instant speed. So this might be in an Is It Spells deck in Standard. As far as this card being a card in Draft and Sealed, I think it's going to be okay. If your opponent doesn't want you to draw 3 cards, they just take 4 to the face, and that's decent. Not too bad at all. Not too shabby. In Standard, your opponent's probably just going to take 4 to the face every single time because card advantage in Standard is way more impactful, but you never know. I think this card might see some play, but anytime you give your opponent the option to do anything in any format, it's certainly looked at as a bad idea. So Risk Factor could be a good card, it could be a terrible card. Either way, it's doing something to kind of have your opponent lose the game, and I think that's okay. Next up here, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is Light of the Legion, a 6-mana angel with Flying Mentor. It's also a 5/5, and whenever it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each white creature you control. For a white weenie deck, this card is like the card you want to put as your top end. Obviously, a white weenie deck is going to be super low to the ground, and you want to have one or two like big, huge bombs. This is a card that's going to do that. If your opponent has removal for this and it does die instead of getting exiled, it's pumping your entire board state, which is amazing, and it's permanent pumps because it's a +1/+1 counter. It also has Mentor, which means it's going to be able to pump something else each time it attacks in. It's also a flyer, and it's a 5/5, so it's going to be able to trade with Rekindling Phoenix really nicely. It can't trade with the Lyra Dawnbringer that well, but that's all right. I think this card is still very, very good, despite that. Still getting off good Mentor triggers on this card and getting a good, board-wide pump once it leaves the battlefield. So I like this card a ton. Super powerful, and can't wait to run this in Standard. As far as this card being a Draft and Sealed card, this is like the best, one of the best rares you can get into in Draft and Sealed. Very first pickable, just a huge bomb, especially if you're getting into like a white or like a Selesnya deck, a white-green deck in Draft and Sealed. Have this on the battlefield. If it does die, it pumps your entire board state. If it doesn't, it just pumps one or two creatures as you're attacking in. If you're ahead in the game, if you're behind in the game, this is still a 5/5 in the air that your opponent probably doesn't want to attack into, so just a great card all around. Next up for us, though, we've got the Rhizome Lurcher. I almost thought this was a translated card. This is a 4-mana 2/2 fungus zombie with Undergrowth. Enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So we have something like this already in the set, I believe, but it had haste at 4 mana. This is also 4 mana, but it is a 2/2 instead of a 0/0, and it is also a common, which is very interesting as well. So I think this card is very good. Probably a card that's just going to come in and be a 3/3 or a 4/4 for 4, and that's perfectly fine. Being a 5/5 or 6/6 in the mid to late game, that's where this card's really going to shine in Draft and Sealed. Not going to see this probably in Standard at all, just kind of one of those cards that may not see that much play thanks to it just being kind of an enter the battlefield ability that doesn't really attack in immediately. So the 0/0 with haste might see more play than this card, but I do think Lurcher here is quite powerful because it is a 2/2 as well, which is very, very good at common. That's crazy. Moving on here, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is Pegasus, not a 8-mana creature, Human Knight, 4/5 with flying and Convoke. This is probably okay. It is 8 mana, so it's going to be one of those things that you probably will just be a 5 mana 4/5 flyer, which is still very good. A good top end bomb for you, good uncommon pick if you're in a white deck or a Selesnya deck. Selesnya deck for sure in Draft and Sealed. This won't see any kind of standard play because it's 8 mana. Obviously, you can make your creatures pay for it because it has Convoke, but it's just going to be a Draft and Sealed bomb for sure. Moving on here for us, another card, which I thought was Thanos for a little bit here. This is a Bolt Splicer Mage, a 2-mana 2/2 creature, Vulcan Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only the mage, if you control one or more other creatures that spell could target, you may choose one of them. Copy the spell and it targets the chosen creature. So this is an interesting card because it, like, you know, you target something to this and it targets something to something else, which is very interesting. This is definitely a Draft and Sealed card if you get into a lot of spells, like a lot of pump spells or a lot of different abilities like that. I think that's probably going to be the only slot for this card. It feels like it might be too narrow for a Standard card. Definitely will need to be brewing around with this to see if it works in Standard. There are a ton of pump spells in Standard, so that might be fun. I feel like this card might see more play in a casual Commander deck. That's kind of where I'm feeling it the most. But I do think in Draft and Sealed, this card is super fun if you have a lot of pump spells and you have more creatures on the battlefield to kind of pump alongside the mage, and that's pretty cool. Next up for us, we've got Mnemonic Betrayal. This is a 3-mana sorcery. Before we get into the card, look at this art. This art is ridiculous. I love the art in this card. We have exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. This is all opponents. This is actually a great card for Commander. You may cast those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though were mana of any type to cast those spells. At the beginning of the next end step, if those cards remained exiled, return them to their owner's graveyard. Exile Mnemonic Betrayal. This is sort of like Past in Flames, but for your opponent's graveyards, and that's kind of amazing. Obviously, the cards come back from the exile back into your opponent's graveyard, so it's not technically doing anything other than just giving you the ability to cast your opponent's spells. But for 3 mana, I like this card a lot. I think it has a lot of maybe eternal-like value. I feel like I saw Pleasant Kenobi on Twitter talking about this maybe having some vintage and legacy impact. I think this card is going to be super fun to use in Standard against like a lot of Golgari lists, a lot of Dimir lists as well, and this is Dimir color too. I think this card, just based on the art, looks like it might have been a Golgari card and got changed to Dimir. Very strange here. Lots of green in here instead of blue and black. But very good card regardless of that. In Draft and Sealed, this card's going to be very strange. I probably would pass it up as your rare in the pack if you get that as a rare. in one of your packs. But besides that, I think this card is super fun regardless. Nextstep Force, we have Electrostatic Field, a 2-mana 0/4 wall defender. Whenever you cast instant or sorcerer spell, Electrostatic Field deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I think we have the Fire Adept, Fire Dancer, Fire Speaker Adept. One of the cards from Amonkhet does this, and it's a 2/1. This is a 0/4 defender that does basically the same thing. Very good, a lot better than the 2/1 because it can survive like a lightning strike to the face, which makes the mono red burn deck kind of a thing now. I kind of want to brew around this card now that we have this in standard. Very powerful in standard, might be okay in draft and sealed. It is a 2-mana 0/4 defender, so that's good enough as far as a like a 15th or 16th pick in your creature slot. But if you get into a lot of like instant sorcery spells, then this card is just going to be a great way to burn your opponent a little extra while you're building out your board state and winning the game. So fun for that. Moving on, we have a Tajic Legion's Edge. This is a 3-mana 3/2 legendary creature, human soldier. His sword, is it on fire, or are those like bursts, like engines or turbines? What's happening? It has haste, mentor, prevent all non-combat damage that will be dealt to other creatures you control, which means they can't be striked or sweltering suns or whatever. You can pay 2. This card gains first strike until end of turn. I really like this card a lot as far as being a great way to get off a mentor trigger. It's also fantastic to be able to make sure all of your creatures survive like a board wipe spell that deals damage. Like obviously Hour of Devastation is cycling out of standard at the moment, but this is a card that if there are those kind of cards coming into the standard environment with Guilds of Ravnica, then we can make sure that if this is on the field, then nothing else dies except for this. So it's prevent all other creatures, not itself. So this is one of the cards that's going to die to like that kind of ability. Kind of like how Shalai in white gives everything else hexproof except herself. This is very similar to that. So like this card a lot for that. As far as this being a card for draft and sealed, it's okay. It's not fantastic. It is a card you might want to pick into if you are in Boros. If this is your pack 1 rare, it could be okay. It really depends on how the rest of your pack is. This is kind of a card that's like a take it or leave it style card. 2 toughness is kind of stressed on the draft and sealed environment, but having haste and mentor on top of it does mean we can get off a pretty good mentor trigger as this card comes into the battlefield. I think that's perfectly fine. Moving on here from this, we've got Experimental Frenzy, a 4-mana instant, or not instant, it's an enchantment. Sorry about that. When you look at the top card of your library at any time, you may play the top card of your library. That's pretty cool. You can't place cards from your hand. What? You can also pay 4 and destroy Experimental Frenzy. Okay, this is a very interesting card, and something that I feel like Saffron Olive needs to make a deck into. Well, I think this could be a fun card for Commander and Brawl, perhaps. For Standard, this card looks to be like almost unplayable. It's very strange, but also in Draft and Sealed, if you get this as a rare, you might want to just pass it up completely. It's a card that needs a lot of different pieces to make work properly, and if you have a lot of cards in hand from this card, then they're just kind of dead cards in hand until you pay the 4 mana to destroy it, so that's not that great. I do think, though, it could be fun if you get to top deck several times over and over again, thanks to Experimental Frenzy. That's really cool. But yeah, probably just for Commander, very casual card at that. And we'll try to make this work in Standard, but we'll see what happens. Next up for us, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is Ancient Troops. This is a 3-mana 2/2 creature zombie soldier. Discard a creature card. Ancient Troops gets +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. Activate this ability once per turn. So a 2/2 that can turn into a 4/4 if you throw a creature card into the graveyard. This is honestly a fantastic common for us for Draft and Sealed. Could probably see this seeing some play in Standard because it can feed your graveyard by pitching things from your hand into your graveyard, so not a lot of things get to do that, and this card definitely does that at the common slot. I think this is very powerful. It also gets trample with the discard ability too, so a 4/4 with trample for 3 mana is amazing. Very good trade-offs here. I think this card is very good pick, high pick for you for a creature if you're in Golgari in Draft and Sealed, and a very good card in Golgari, maybe even in Standard. Moving up here for us, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is Might of the Masses, a 1 green mana instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. This is one of those few cards that was shifted, I think, from common to uncommon. Very good card regardless. I think this card is probably going to be seeing a lot of play maybe in Standard if you have a go-wide strategy with a Selesnya deck. This is definitely a Selesnya card for Draft and Sealed as well, and can be a card that can like almost win the game if you have lots of things on the battlefield. If your opponent if you have a 1/1 attacking in, if your opponent doesn't let it or lets it through, it can maybe turn into a 5/5 or a 6/6 and close out the game. This is amazing for that. But besides that, this is also a very good card for defending against an opponent as well, being very good for a combat trick too. So really like this card as far as that goes. And and think that it's going to be pretty powerful in the draft and sealed environment, as well as being able to see some play in standard too. Moving up here, we have another card that needs to be translated. So many cards today that need to be translated. This is a Plague Spreader, a 3-mana 3/2 human shaman. When Plague Spreader enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player that can't discards a card. Very interesting. Very much a Commander and Brawl card for sure. Like this card as well in Draft and Sealed. I don't think this card is going to be that great in Standard. Just giving your opponent options again is a bad idea. But in Draft and Sealed, this is probably fine, being able to have them sack their biggest bomb, or maybe a 1/1 or a 2/2 or whatever. And if they don't, they just discard a card as well. So you're still getting value, even if they don't have creatures on the battlefield. And it's also a 3-mana 3/2, which is not bad either. Moving up here for us, we've got Drowned Secrets. This is our preview card that we talked about in our previous video that was on this channel. It's a mill card. I'm not really gonna repeat myself too much. It's a fantastic mill card for rare. Might see some fun play in Draft and Sealed, and we'll definitely be seeing a lot of play in Standard. I saw this on Twitter for sure from Saffron Olive, but you can build this with a Nexus of Fate deck. Mill yourself with Nexus of Fate, basically, until you get to Nexus of Fate, and then just Nexus of Fate your opponent to oblivion, because each time you cast a blue spell, Nexus of Fate, you're milling your opponent for 2, and that's going to close out the match. So this is amazing for that. Cannot wait to see if this works. But that's going to do it for all of the previews today, guys. Hope you like them. Let me know what your favorites were in the comments down below. Drowned Secret is definitely my favorite, just because I'm hyped about having mill and being able to brew mill in Standard once again. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like if you like it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and look forward to more preview content, deck techs, you know, set reviews, that kind of stuff that's coming very soon, as well as a pre-release guide in the near future, probably sometime next week. And yeah, that's going to do it for today, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more awesome MTG content just like this. And make sure to tap the bell icon to be notified whenever a video is made live. If you want to keep watching content, here are 2 more videos for you. This video and many others are sponsored by MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. Buy and sell digital singles to build your online collection today with MTGO Traders, and get your paper singles, accessories, and much more from Cape Fear Games. Whatever your Magic needs, both places have you covered.